Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Robin Dwyer. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken visits Egypt and Qatar to try and secure a truce deal between Israel and Hamas. Heavy fighting in southern Gaza as fears grow of an Israeli ground assault on the border town of Rafah, where more than 1 million people are sheltering. Snowstorms and icy rain sweep across China, causing travel chaos for hundreds of millions of people heading home for the Spring Festival. And 3 dead in California as torrential rain and mudslides bring chaos to the Golden State. The United States military says it's carried out more strikes in Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen. The strikes, which Washington described as self-defense, targeted explosive-laden drone boats. The Houthis are continuing to target ships in the Red Sea. They fired missiles at 2 vessels, causing minor damage to a cargo ship owned by a British company. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is visiting Egypt and Qatar as part of a diplomatic push for a truce between Israel and Hamas. It's his 5th trip to the Middle East since the conflict broke out in October, and his first visit since Washington brokered an offer with Israeli input for an extended ceasefire. It was presented to Hamas last week by mediators and is still awaiting a response. Following the talks, Blinken's expected to fly to Israel. Let's talk to our correspondent in Tel Aviv, Sarah Coates. So, Sarah, what's come out of these talks so far?
Hello there, Robin. Well, look, it is being reported that Blinken is still in Cairo meeting with the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and other senior officials who've really been instrumental in trying to end this war, trying to get these captives out. Still no word on what has come out of these talks happening now in Egypt, but it is important to say that Egyptian officials are certainly very worried about this expected push by Israeli forces further south into the Gaza Strip. We are talking here about the city of Rafah, which of course is a place where many displaced people are sheltering. Egyptian officials are certainly very worried that this could then force these displaced people potentially over the border into Egypt. Now, there's also concern centred around this 4 decades-long peace treaty between Israel and Egypt, with officials there saying that if there is any troop build-up, any military deployment of Israeli forces on that border, then that agreement could certainly be jeopardised. So still waiting to hear what comes out of these talks in Cairo. We do know that the Secretary of State will then travel to Doha to meet with Qatari officials who also have been key mediators in these deals to get hostages out. Also this fresh deal that we're hearing more and more about every day. So certainly optimism in Washington that there may be a breakthrough in these talks, but that is yet to be seen, given that the Secretary of State will travel to Israel and the West Bank for talks tomorrow.
Well, as you say, he will be coming to Israel. What can we expect from that visit?
Well, look, that same optimism, Robin, is certainly not being felt here in Israel. Washington, of course, is hoping to get the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu over the line to try and see some sort of a pause in fighting, which could then be extended into a ceasefire. But like we've been hearing day after day, even yesterday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu standing extremely firm yesterday, vowing that the war will not end until all Hamas leaders are killed. And this has really been one of Israel's stated objectives. It is a complete victory in the Gaza Strip. Israel says it won't pull any forces out until that has been achieved. And Hamas also standing firm, it is very important to say. It's been saying that no captives will be released until there is a full withdrawal of Israeli forces. So certainly a very, very difficult time tomorrow for the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. It is important to also mention that he will be visiting the West Bank to Ramallah, where he'll be meeting with the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. But certainly he's got a lot on his plate ahead of him. And this, of course, Robin, comes amid growing anger here in Israel. Right now, we can report that there are protests happening at the Kerem Shalom crossing. That's that tri-border crossing with Israel, Gaza and Egypt, with Israeli demonstrators once again blocking aid from going into the Strip, saying that no aid should go in until these captives are released.
Sarah, thank you very much. Our correspondent Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv. Palestinian officials say the death toll in Gaza is approaching 28,000 people. Heavy fighting continues in the southern city of Khan Yunis, and there are fears that Israel's planning a ground attack on the border town of Rafah, where more than 1 million people are sheltering. Let's talk to our correspondent Akram Al-Sassari, who is there. So, Akram, heavy fighting in Khan Yunis and at least 14 people killed.
Well, as a matter of fact, heavy fighting in Khan Yunis continues. The lives of the people continue to be wasted according to the ongoing bombardment. In Khan Yunis, there was an incident that took the life of 14 Palestinians. Also, another fight targeting another shelter. Another UNRWA school took the life of 1 Palestinian and injured 5 others. Another attack happened in the immediate vicinity of Nasser Hospital, also causing a widespread fire in the area. But we are still waiting to hear some confirmation about the number of people who were injured and killed. So the bottom line, the fire is continuous, and the Israeli occupation is also targeting the area between Khan Yunis and Rafah. Sometimes some areas in Rafah are targeted, such as the incident that took place around 45 minutes ago in Al-Barazil neighborhood, which is a Rafah area. The area was targeted, and we are still waiting to hear the news about the people injured and killed. Also, we are hearing some news from Rafah, from Gaza and the north. The fire exchange is continuous. The bombardment are continuous. The displacement of the people in that area is also continuous. So overall, the Gaza Strip, the tense is rising. Increased number of people is falling, either killed or injured. Increased number of houses are destroyed. And Israel seems to be focusing now in the buffer zone between Rafah and Khan Yunis. It looks like they are preparing for the ground operation, and by targeting some specific points in the different area, they are trying to prevent the Palestinian factions from fighting back if they have already decided to start their ground operation in Rafah area.
So, Akram, you are in Rafah. The United Nations is reporting increased strikes there.
Yes, indeed, we could hear the increased strikes there. I could hear one of them around 45 minutes ago. Overnight, I could hear several bombardments coming from several directions, which was indicative of the fact that they were targeting the area between Rafah and Khan Yunis. They were targeting the area around Rafah border as well. They hit around 4 or 5 strikes in different neighborhoods in the immediate vicinity of Rafah border, and that is indicative once again of an imminent plan of a ground operation to be starting in Rafah, but people are not aware when or how, or to what extent, and what kind of preparations and arrangements have been agreed upon between the Egyptian side and the Israeli occupation for the sake of preventing large-scale injuries and death among the Palestinians who are waiting in Rafah, which with the amount of whom is around 1.4 or 1.5 million Palestinians. So the tension is rising. The bombardment is heavier. The targeting is also very heavy, including targeting some cars and vehicles that were carrying Palestinians in the streets of Rafah. And the Palestinians are still waiting to see what would be unfolding as Israel continues the bombardment.
Akram, thank you very much. Our correspondent Akram Al-Sassari in Rafah. Freezing rain, snow and ice is causing widespread disruption in China as millions of people travel home for the Spring Festival holiday. Southern Hunan and Hubei provinces have borne the brunt of the severe weather, which deteriorated over the weekend, slowing traffic to a crawl, cancelling hundreds of trains and delaying flights. It coincides with the biggest mass travel migration in the world as people across the country head home to see their families for Chinese New Year. Thousands of passengers have been left stranded at railway stations in central Wuhan as the extreme weather brings train services to a halt. Our correspondent Huang Yucheng reports.
At Hankou railway station in Wuhan, it's uncommon to witness crowds waiting outside of the main entrance building like this.
刷了进不去啊，应该是里面人太多了吧，不让进吧。
Passengers eager to reach their destination ahead of the upcoming holidays are now facing extended waits and uncertainty. From the look of the notice board, it states that due to the heavy snowfall and freezing weather conditions, several trains departing from this station are currently suspended. According to authorities, Wuhan Railways suspended the operation of more than 140 round trips on Sunday and over 70 round trips on Monday to ensure the safety of passengers and smooth functioning of the railway system.
我昨天本来是昨天下午6点多钟的车，不是停了吗？我昨天就在这里呢，没上到车停了的呀。6点，下午6点。那你慌啥呀？你出去逛个街再回来了，你在这等。
Despite widespread inconvenience for those relying on train travel, in the entrance, people are waiting and entering the hall in an orderly manner. The majority of passengers show understanding regarding the extended waiting period.
没车了，没得选择。
心态很好。
那必须要现在啊，这个天气，那你没办法。
The railway authorities has organized 3,000 employees to conduct snow removal to ensure the smooth functioning of the railway tracks.
全运的一些，但是很多车都开多了，你在后续上面在手上再看一下，还有列车在售票的，又开动了很多列车。就是说，在昨天的晚点的车没到的，基本上没有，继续在晚点的。
Hubei province expected to endure low temperatures and freezing weather for the next 3 days. Passengers advised to stay updated on the latest announcement. Huang Yucheng, CGTN, Wuhan, Hubei Province.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Torrential rains and mudslides bring chaos to the U.S. state of California.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more...
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us, excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken visits Egypt and Qatar to try and secure a truce deal between Israel and Hamas. Heavy fighting in southern Gaza as fears grow of an Israeli ground assault on the border town of Rafah, where more than 1 million people are sheltering. And snowstorms and icy rain sweep across China, causing travel chaos for hundreds of millions of people heading home for the Spring Festival. At least 3 people are dead as storms wreak havoc across the US state of California. Parts of San Diego and Los Angeles are in a state of emergency as torrential rain causes mudslides and leaves thousands of homes without power. Our correspondent Louise Greenwood reports.
Californians left to clear up the devastation after some of the worst weather ever seen in the country's most populous state.
This is among the heaviest we've ever had. Yeah, this is bad.
For the second time in less than a week, the so-called Pineapple Express storm swept over the west coast, bringing with it near hurricane force winds. A state of emergency has been declared in an area home to more than 20 million people. In Los Angeles, rescue teams were out as the daily rainfall record was smashed, with authorities issuing evacuation orders in the worst-hit areas and warning of a major risk to life and property.
This has been a tough day for our city, a tough day for Angelenos, and I have spent time with our fire chief going around town looking at some of what is really devastation for many homeowners and residents who have had to suffer from mudslides related to the storm.
In the hilly region of Northern California, residents were killed by falling trees as high winds damaged homes and businesses.
The house started fiercely shaking, and then we just hear a big boom, and the ceiling fell down.
It was just unbelievable. Winds were pretty strong. And the trees, we was looking at the trees, they were bowing and bending.
Originating off the coast of Hawaii, the storm system first arrived last week, fueled by atmospheric pressure, which unleashed half a year's worth of rain in a matter of hours.
There's nothing ever, quote, normal here. It's always either much above normal or much below normal. And so it's a highly fluctuating element, if you will.
And people are being warned to brace for more, as forecasters say another month's worth of rain is on the way in the next couple of days. Louise Greenwood, CGTN.
The death toll is continuing to climb from wildfires that tore through a tourist city on Chile's central coast. At least 120 people are confirmed to have died, but hundreds of others are still missing in the country's deadliest wildfires in recent history. Firefighters continue to try and get control of the flames, which have been burning for 3 days. The military has been dispatched to the hardest hit areas, and a period of national mourning has been declared. Turkey is marking 1 year since a devastating earthquake that killed more than 55,000 people. Vigils are taking place across several cities to remember the dead. Some people have voiced anger at the slow response of President Erdogan's government to the quake. Tens of thousands of buildings were destroyed in the disaster, leaving at least 3 million people homeless. President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, says the EU will be at Ukraine's side for every single day of the conflict with Russia. She made the remarks at the European Parliament, where MEPs are discussing how to keep up support for Ukraine. On Thursday, all 27 EU members agreed to a deal providing an extra $53 billion aid package to Ukraine, despite weeks of Hungary's objections. Let's talk to our correspondent, Giles Gibson, who's in Brussels. So, Giles, MEPs getting a chance to hear from Ursula von der Leyen about this aid package for Ukraine that was agreed on Thursday.
Yeah, the tone of Ursula von der Leyen's speech was really rather reflective, looking back on the last couple of years and how the Ukrainians, as well as the European Union, has responded to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. She describes the response from the Ukrainians as heroic and said that the Russian President Vladimir Putin had started a fight against freedom, self-determination and democracy at large. But in this speech, we also saw Ursula von der Leyen looking ahead at what could possibly come. Take a listen.
This indomitable spirit is what we have to keep in mind here in Europe and right across the democratic world at this juncture of the war. There's no time for wavering. There's no time for navel-gazing. The message Europe sent at last week's European Council was crystal clear. Europe will be at Ukraine's side for every single day of this war and for every single day thereafter.
Now, Robin, you mentioned that fresh $50 billion+ aid package that was agreed at the last European Council summit, that special summit. Well, we've actually had as well on the sidelines of this debate at the European Parliament in Strasbourg a deal agreed on how to basically implement that aid package. So what we're going to see basically is that the different tranches of aid for Ukraine are going to be delivered as the Ukrainians deliver on certain reforms within their government over transparency in the courts and that kind of thing.
Some other business going on. The EU due to announce its climate targets for 2040 as the bloc faces mass protests by farmers from different countries. And Ursula von der Leyen's rolled back on some key issues.
Yeah, that's right. We're expecting that announcement from European Commission officials in an hour and 10 minutes from now. We'll be hearing from Maroš Šefčovič, who is the European Commission's really lead official when it comes to the European Green Deal. This is what I'm expecting him to say. This is being widely reported here in Brussels, that the target will be a 90% reduction by 2040 compared to levels seen in 1990. But as you say, off the back of these farmer protests that we've seen right in the heart of Brussels, as well as all over Europe, there is now this accusation that the European Commission are really watering down some of their targets, specifically when it comes to the agricultural sector. So there have been reports that certain language about specific targets for emissions within the agricultural sector have been removed from this document that's going to be published, as I say, in about the next hour or so. And also we've seen Ursula von der Leyen at the European Parliament in Strasbourg coming out and saying that a proposed bill, a proposed piece of legislation that was set to slash the amount of pesticides that farmers can use here in the EU, well, Ursula von der Leyen is now saying that that bill is not going to be brought forward.
Giles, thank you very much. Our correspondent Giles Gibson in Brussels. US lawmakers are expected to vote on Wednesday on an emergency bill to stop migrants from entering the country and expel those who've entered illegally. In the run-up to the vote, the protesters have been out on the streets of Eagle Pass, a border town in Texas. Our correspondent Frank Contreras reports.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott, a Republican, argues that the Biden administration is failing to stop undocumented immigrants from crossing the U.S.-Mexico border. Months ahead of the November presidential election, Abbott's efforts to deter undocumented migrants are now at the core of a fierce political debate over immigration. The governor says Texas would relinquish control of parts of the border immediately if President Joe Biden took stronger steps to stop people from crossing illegally.
The Texas National Guard, they're undertaking operations to expand this effort. We're not going to contain ourselves just to this park. We are expanding to further areas to make sure that we will expand our level of deterrence and denial of illegal entry into the United States.
As the governor delivered his speech, protesters from both sides of the debate faced off on the streets of Eagle Pass. One side included mainly those who plan to vote for Donald Trump to return to the White House. They support the governor's efforts to block immigrants from entering Texas. Daniel Demora was born in the United States and raised in Brazil. He calls undocumented immigrants criminals.
This is a country of Americans, so we are not supposed to be the place of the world to accept every single immigrant. They could go to other places, like Europe, for example, too.
Across the street, a group of mostly Mexican-American protesters vocally pushed back, showing their support for immigrants. They call Governor Abbott's approach racist. Josie Papas, a lifelong resident of Eagle Pass, takes a softer approach.
Border cities love each other. We consider our border city, we call it our sister city. You come and tell us something like that, we're gonna think, what? Where are you from? Because we get along. We get along on both sides of our border. Both sides of Rio Grande get along.
As immigration takes center stage in the lead up to the U.S. presidential election, migrants continue to make their way to the United States. And that is supercharging this already heated debate. Frank Contreras, CGTN, Eagle Pass, Texas.
The World Health Organization says around 65 million people are living with an amputated limb. Now, a Spanish startup is using new 3D printed technology to help improve their mobility. Our correspondent Ken Brown reports from Madrid.
I'm 44 years old, and since I was born, I've never used both arms.
When Philip, a primary school teacher, received his prosthetic hand, he became emotional at the thought he could finally hold a book and a piece of chalk at the same time for the first time. It was made possible thanks to Spanish NGO Ayúdame 3D, or Help Me 3D. Based in Madrid, the company has used 3D printing technology to help more than 500 people in over 65 countries worldwide.
I love to create toys, to create my own things with designs with my computer. And then I bought a 3D printer in 2015. And then I realized that I could help with this passion. I created the first arm for people with no elbow. I put it in a luggage, 5 of them, and I went to Kenya to give to 5 people in there, and it works perfect.
3D printing technology has now made it possible to create life-changing limbs tailor-made to people with specific needs at a fraction of the cost. Hands, arms, legs, from simple designs using elastics and cables, they now offer a wide range of movement and even help some kids feel like superheroes. Simple joys like being able to lift a cup or eat with 2 hands, working to make and mend clothing, driving a motorcycle or putting food on the table. For many, these limbs are life-changing. Consolación, an 86-year-old woman in Madrid, is just happy to be able to hug again. With 5 million amputees in Africa, Ayúdame 3D wants to share its knowledge, teaching teams to use tech on site in Kenya, Uganda and beyond.
I'm Nelson from Bamba, and welcome to our 3D lab. And the main activity, the purpose of this lab is to print the prosthesis arm. And we have several activities, like being the main activity. Far too long, people have been left behind with the disability.
Ayúdame 3D has received recognition from Spain's royal family and was awarded the European Parliament's European Citizens Prize late last year. But perhaps the best reward of all comes from those who have been helped.
This is a special sacrifice towards humanity, and I'm really proud for this gentleman who has done great. I say God bless you very much. May God open avenues for you. And you have also opened big dreams for me.
The headlines again. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken visits Egypt and Qatar to try and secure a truce deal between Israel and Hamas. Heavy fighting in southern Gaza as fears grow of an Israeli ground assault on the border town of Rafah, where more than 1 million people are sheltering. And snowstorms and icy rain sweep across China, causing travel chaos for hundreds of millions of people heading home for the Spring Festival. And that is the world today. Thanks for watching. Get more news on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.